What is up, everyone? My name is Ken, also known as Wiltshire. Welcome back to another OptiFlex video. And in this video, well, we like overkill around here. So we'll be upgrading OptiFlex from a 1070 Ti to an RTX 2070 Super. So I've always had this idea for upgrading the 1070 Ti Mini that is inside OptiFlex to the RTX 2070. Actually, by the time this idea came to fruition and it was time to do this video, Zotac had released the 2070 Super Mini, which was awesome. So even more horsepower than what I had originally in mind. But I didn't really want to do just a video on doing a GPU swap and showing you guys the benchmarks, because that would just be kind of lackluster, a lackluster conclusion to OptiFlex. This very well actually might be the finale to OptiFlex. I know I keep saying that, but this really actually is probably going to be the last OptiFlex video that I make, because I am running out of ideas for this thing. Like, I've done everything that I can possibly think of inside OptiFlex to even upgrade it or make it aesthetically more pleasing. So I was stuck, and that's why this video took a long time to come out, because I really had no ideas on what to do next with OptiFlex other than the GPU swap. And I was just about going to cave in and do the GPU swap video, and that was going to be that, until a user by the name of Aervosa on Twitter and YouTube. She has a YouTube channel and a Twitter account. I'll link to both of them in the description below. Go over there and thank her, maybe subscribe to her YouTube channel. She is a very nice person, and she was kind enough to send me drawings, and that's right, drawings of some ideas to do or implement to OptiFlex. And I have these ideas printed out, so we're gonna have a look at these ideas, and I'll explain how these things have inspired me to do a lot with OptiFlex. So here we go. So let's have a look at the drawings here. Now, the drawings for the front panel here was actually what inspired me most and gave me the most ideas. So she suggested that maybe I do a circuit board design on the front panel and actually the side panel. I do have the side panel picture underneath this one here. We'll get to that in a second. But I don't really know how to implement the motherboard trace design. I really like the idea, but I could get a paint pen and maybe draw it on there. But I kind of like to do things a little bit more professional than that. So I'm still trying to explore an option on implementing that a little bit better. She also wanted me to do a cooler font with the OptiFlex logo on the front panel of the computer case. And this was what really sparked an idea in my head. And I was like, oh boy, there's an idea. Oh, I like that. But I didn't really know how to implement it to the front panel of the computer. But I did take that idea and kind of twist it into my own. And I ran with the idea of it, and I really liked it. And she suggested that I put my own W logo, you know, for my YouTube channel, on the computer case, and I really liked that idea. I really want to put my logo on it. Somewhere tasteful, you know, not going to be distracting, because it really is my own brainchild. It is my own creation. I really want, you know, to brand it as my own. So this is also the drawing of the side panel of the computer, again with the motherboard traces. And she's just suggested that maybe I do some acid etching with this, and I really wish I had an additional side panel for the computer so I could experiment, because I've never done acid etching myself. She also suggested using a you know, my own logo, but having an RGB logo on the corner, and again, that's what sparked the idea to put my logo on the computer. So those are the drawings from Aervosa. Thank you very much, Aervosa. I really appreciate it. These really did spark some inspiration in my brain, give me some ideas on how to implement things into OptiFlex, and this is what really made this video come to fruition with these ideas instead of being a boring GPU swap video. So let's get with the changes that I made to the computer. So first is the front panel. Now the front panel, this is the original one that I'm holding in my right hand here. This is the original 3040 front panel. Now, as you can see on the front of OptiFlex here, it is now completely black. Now, I swapped out the 3040's front panel with a 3050. I found somebody on Kijiji that was parting out in OptiPlex 3050. Unfortunately, they had sold the side panel, motherboard, RAM, and CPU, and they only had the chassis and front panel left. I was like, I'll give you $15 for the front panel, and the guy said yes. And the reason why I'm swapping out the front panel is because actually when this was thrown in the garbage, there's a broken clip right here. It broke the clip off. And I've tried gluing it back on like several times, and it's just not staying there. So it didn't really clip onto the case too well for the OptiFlex case. And another thing I really didn't like about this was the silver part on the front panel here. And I found it kind of took away from the build aesthetically because the build is all black. Like, it completely blacked out the build. Like, the motherboard is black, the CPU cooler is black, the fans are black, the PSU shroud is black, all the cabling is black. I painted the chassis, everything is blacked out, and I really wanted the front panel to match the aesthetic of the build. So I went with the 3050 front panel, which is all black, and I think it looks better, in my opinion, than this guy here. So that was the first idea I had with the front panel after looking at the front panel drawings from Aervosa. So that was the first implementation that I made there, and I think it looks a lot better. Let me know what you guys think. The second implementation is like, well, since we're looking at an all black PC build here, I'm actually going to take the side panel off of OptiFlex here just to show you guys a little bit what I'm talking about. It'll be a little bit easier. You're not getting reflections from the windows or anything like that. Me actually sleeving the water tubing for the AIO that's inside the computer. Now, if you missed the video on me liquid cooling OptiFlex, I'll leave a link to the previous video in the description below, and I highly recommend watching that video. It was quite the journey trying to get this thing liquid cooled anyway. So let me just take this off for a quick second here. There we go. Should be a little bit easier to see the cable job that I did here. So what I did was I actually took this sleeving, which was Alex Tech 10 foot 1.5 inch kind of paracord sleeving that I found on Amazon, and I actually put it around the clear tubing that I put on the radiator and water block. And in my personal opinion, it looks a lot cleaner. Like, I kind of liked having the clear tubing on the inside of the computer because I could tell if the flow of water or the fluid inside the loop was actually, you know, flowing properly, and if there was an issue with, say, the water pump, water block, or the radiator. But I think this just looks aesthetically more pleasing, having this guy on the tubing of the AIO. So that was another change that I implemented for OptiFlex here. Another thing that I decided to do was I wanted to add another hard drive to OptiFlex. And the reason why I wanted to do that was that I'm having issues trying to edit with this machine. This is actually my travel rig. So I actually take this to my friend's house for playing Apex and stuff like that. Well, before Corona hit. We haven't done that for probably 5 months now due to that fact. But I do take this around when I go to, say, to my cottage. I do take this to video edit while I'm up there, so I can kind of stay on top of things for YouTube. But the problem I'm facing is lack of storage. Now, I only have a 500 gigabyte Samsung 860 EVO inside OptiFlex here, and I find that I'm running out of space having games such as Warzone, Apex, Premiere Pro, Windows installed. I'm really running low on space. So I wanted to figure out another way to add some storage to the computer. The only problem is I've completely maxed out the power supply inside OptiFlex. I've completely maxed out the SF600 to the point where I have no SATA power left, no PCI power left. Pretty much everything is populated on the modular power supply at this point. So I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. The only thing I could possibly do is M.2. And that's where I really would have loved to have that OptiPlex 50 motherboard, because it has a built-on M.2 slot on the motherboard. And I was like, damn it, what am I going to do now? So I was thinking about it for a while, and M.2 was still in the back of my brain. I'm like, well, I still have free PCIe slots, except they're X1. Is there even an X1 adapter for M.2 SSDs that exist? And AliExpress came in clutch. Like, I could not find anything except for an X4, because obviously the bandwidth on an X1 PCIe slot is going to kneecap the SSD performance. So a lot of people go, why even bother? Why even make it? So luckily AliExpress had an X1 adapter. And I bought a cheap M.2 SSD off AliExpress too, because I wasn't quite sure if this adapter would work at all, or if it would ruin, say, a good Samsung 960 EVO or Pro that I have lying around. So I stuck it in there, and we now have a scratch disk and some storage for video editing. So that is fantastic. That's a lot better. I could even throw some games on that scratch disk if I wanted to, get them off my main hard drive or SSD, such as Apex and Warzone. Warzone is ridiculous. Like, holy smokes, why is Warzone so big? It's like 120 gigabytes. It's ridiculous. Anyways, so that was another implementation that I made for OptiFlex. It actually worked out really, really well. And I had to take out this Ethernet X1 card that I had out of the computer. So I've gone with a USB 3.0 Wi-Fi adapter from TP-Link. I believe it's called the Archer T3U. And I've decided to just run Ethernet, or rather Wi-Fi instead of Ethernet on OptiFlex. And if I do need Ethernet, I do have a USB 3 to Ethernet adapter in my backpack for my travel stuff. I have like a travel keyboard, mouse, and memory card adapters and stuff like that for when I take OptiFlex to a different location other than my house. So that is the compromise I had to make, because I didn't want to populate all of the PCI Express slots on the motherboard, because I was kind of fearful of it robbing all the bandwidth for the RTX 2070 Super and kneecapping the performance of it or bottlenecking it. So those are all the implementations that I made for OptiFlex, except for the biggest one. And the biggest one was definitely an idea from Aervosa. And instead of putting the OptiFlex logo on the front panel, I've put it on the RTX 2070 Super. And I was really happy with how this turned out. I made the logo in Photoshop, I uploaded it to Twitter, and I asked everybody on my Twitter account, what do you guys think of this logo? Do you think it looks nice? Would you use it? Would you change it, and how? So a lot of people said they would change like where I connected the I and the F, and I made that change, and you guys were absolutely right. That was a lot cleaner look. And after I took that constructive criticism, I went to my Cricut machine, uploaded the image to my Cricut machine, cut it out on some black vinyl, and I also ordered some frosted kind of glass vinyl. They use it on office windows, I don't know why, for like an aesthetic look. But what I did was I took this graphics card apart, took the black emblem that says Zotac Gaming on it, and I wet sanded it off completely. And then what I did is I slapped the frosted glass vinyl on the emblem, and then the black vinyl with the OptiFlex logo cut out over top of it. And this is the final result. I think it looks freaking amazing. It actually came out so good. I was so proud of this idea and how well it turned out. I was so proud. I actually posted a teaser image for you guys, and a lot of you guys said that looks awesome. So I'm glad you guys think that that implementation for OptiFlex looks awesome. I really wanted people to know the name of the computer, you know what I mean? Like if I brought this to a conference or a convention or something like that, I really wanted to bring this to LTX 2020, but unfortunately that got canceled, and show it off there. But maybe next year. And I thought that would be a really cool thing to implement, was the OptiFlex glowing logo on the side, just so you know, it kind of looks cool when you look through the window. You can see my logo on the water pump, which was another thing I cut out on my Cricut. That was another idea. Instead of putting it on the side panel, I put it on the water pump instead of that ugly Intel sticker and the OptiFlex logo. So those were the changes that I made to OptiFlex. I'm going to get into the benchmarks for the M.2 SSD and the 2070 Super compared to the 1070 Ti Mini. And then that will wrap up OptiFlex, I believe, once and for all. So let's get into the benchmarks, guys. Here we go. Drum roll, please. And we absolutely killed the 1070 Ti. I don't know what to tell you. So after overclocking the 2070 Super, I got a total score of 17,983. Now, when compared to the previous results with the 1070 Ti, which was also heavily overclocked, mind you, we got 15,955. So we got a 2,033 point jump from the 1070 Ti to the 2070 Super. Now, we could probably get a better result if it wasn't for the CPU that's in OptiFlex. Now, the max CPU we can use is a 6700. And if we had a 6700K, and if I overclock that more, we could definitely break the 18,000 point barrier, probably quite easily. But I'm still pretty happy with the results, obviously, out of a Dell OptiPlex 3040. Now, the graphics score here was 25,585 as compared to the 1070 Ti Mini's 21,246. So we gained a lot. We gained like 4,000 and a half-ish. So that's a pretty big jump in graphics score. As for the physics score, I don't know why, but for some reason the physics score is a little bit lower on the 2070 Super's run, probably due to the processor getting warm with the warmer graphics card in here. But if anybody knows how to improve the physics score, let me know. I'd very much appreciate why that is lower, or know why that is lower. So the physics score on the 2070 Super was 11,468. Meanwhile, on the 1070 Ti Mini, it was 11,655. As for our combined score on the 1070 Ti Mini, it was 6,894. For the 2070 Super, we got a 7,568 combined score. So that is a lot higher than it was before. I'm very happy with the results here. Actually, let's have a look at what the hottest CPU, core, and GPU looked like. So the GPU got up to 68 degrees Celsius, which is, that's nothing, that's great. That's a huge result. I was expecting much higher than that. I was expecting maybe in the 80s, because this thing could be probably a hot box, because I don't have very many intake fans. I've only got the 2 in the front there, and they're only 80mm fans. So that's actually very surprising. I'm very happy with the GPU's temperature, its max temperature. But let's have a look at the CPU's max temperature here. Just scroll up to find it here. So the CPU's max package temperature was 59 degrees Celsius. That's a fantastic result. Yeah, we didn't even crack 60 degrees on the processor. That's awesome. So I don't know why the physics score is a little bit lower, but it is what it is. And yeah, so I'm very happy with the FireStrike score. Next, what we're going to do before we get into the game benchmarks is we're going to benchmark that M.2 SSD in the PCIe X1 adapter. And I have it running in the background here. I had it running in the background just after the results finished there. So when my talking point came up, we are good to go. So the sequential read and write on here, the read is 416 megabits per second and the write is 397 megabits per second, which sadly points towards the X1 slot on the OptiPlex 3040's motherboard being PCIe 2.0 and not 3.0. If it was 3.0, I think the theoretical max is in the 900 megabits, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to look that up. I might put an annotation to see if I'm right. But PCIe 2.0 is around, I believe, 500-ish, maybe 450 for the theoretical max of read and write. So that's still a decent result. I'm still pretty happy with that because I obviously couldn't add another SSD or hard drive in here with no other SATA power connector. So we had to go through the motherboard instead using that adapter, and I'm actually very happy to have that as a scratch disk and a boot drive for games. So with that said, we're going to get into the gaming benchmarks. We're going to go through the same games that we did with the 1070 Ti Mini, such as Rise of the Tomb Raider, and I believe The Witcher 3 was one of them. I believe Apex Legends was in there somewhere, but we'll run all the previous games that we did before so we get a good comparison between the two graphics cards. So here we go. The first game on the benchmarking list is Apex Legends Season 6. This is the game that I usually play the most and the one that OptiFlex sees the most, and this was at 1080p medium-high settings with AA off and trilinear filtering. Now this footage is 1080p and it was upscaled to 4K. Every time I do that, there will be an annotation in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. With that said, the maximum FPS for this run of Apex Legends was 144.9, which is the in-game FPS max for some reason. The average FPS was 130.2, the minimum FPS was 82, the 1% low was 81.9, and the 0.1% low was 69. So that brings it pretty much in line with the 1070 Ti, almost to a T in terms of benchmarking data. And the reason why that is because we're more CPU bound than we are GPU bound at the 1080p resolution. So if we really want to push the RTX 2070 Super to its absolute limits, we're going to have to jack the resolution up to 1440p. And this is exactly what I did. So I shifted the resolution from 1080p to 1440p in Apex just to shift the graphical load from the CPU to the GPU. Now keep in mind, none of the graphical settings except for resolution was changed, so medium-high settings, anti-aliasing off, trilinear filtering as well for the Apex run here. And the reason why I did this is because I had a sneaking suspicion that the Intel i7-6700 in OptiFlex was holding things back, and with the benchmarking data you're about to see, I was definitely correct. So let's have a look at the benchmarking data for Apex running in 1440p. The maximum FPS was 144.9, again the in-game FPS cap. The average FPS was 139.9, the minimum FPS was 90.8, the 1% low was 93.9, and the 0.1% low was 76.1. So all of the benchmarking data was higher than 1080p, which was actually really quite interesting to see. I actually ran a lot of tests on Apex Legends between 1080p and 1440p to confirm that 1440p ran better on Apex Legends. But that all comes down to how the game is made and what it's optimized for and what hardware it likes better. So there's some titles that will actually prefer 1080p over 1440p with the hardware that's in OptiFlex. So the next game that we'll be benchmarking is Doom 2016. Unfortunately, I don't own Doom Eternal just yet. I don't want to buy it and download it just specifically for this video. So we're using Doom 2016 because I ran it on the 1070 Ti Mini previously as well. So this was in 1080p on the Ultra preset, except I was using the Vulkan API, TSAA, and motion blur off. With those settings, we got a maximum FPS of 200.9, an average FPS of 181.6, a minimum FPS of 137.9, a 1% low of 122.8, and a 0.1% low of 101.6. Now keep in mind, this data is actually lower than the 1070 Ti Mini. The 1070 Ti Mini was 1% better than the RTX 2070 Super. So I don't know if it's a driver issue or if the Turing architecture doesn't like the Vulkan API as much as the previous architecture that the 1070 Ti was on. But interestingly enough, while running 1440p on Doom, it actually way outperformed 1080p. So this is yet another title like Apex Legends where it performs much better at 1440p resolution than 1080p. I gotta admit, this one really caught me off guard. The same settings apply for 1440p as they did 1080, Ultra Preset, TSAA, Motion Blur Off, Vulkan API, and such. With those settings, we got a maximum FPS of 200.5 FPS, we got an average FPS of 185.2, the minimum FPS was 159.8, the 1% low was 131.3, and the 0.1% low was 112.1. With results like these, this kind of proves my theory that the 6700 inside OptiFlex is holding it back in terms of performance for some game titles. Now, not all game titles are going to work better on 1440p, but most of them do. The next few games we're going to have a look at are kind of the exception to that 1440p rule. For example, Rise of the Tomb Raider at 1080p on the very high preset while using SMAA and Motion Blur Off actually performed better than its 1440p counterpart. So the maximum FPS we got on the 1080p run was 190.7, the average FPS was 163.5, minimum FPS was 138.7, the 1% low was 103.5, and the 0.1% low was 43.1. Meanwhile, on 1440p for Rise of the Tomb Raider, using the exact same graphical settings, the very high preset, while using SMAA and Motion Blur Off, we got a maximum FPS of 165.4, an average FPS of 129.7, a minimum FPS of 88.8, a 1% low of 88.3, and a 0.1% low of 44.7. As you can see there, Rise of the Tomb Raider at 1080p runs better than 1440p, but not by much. I would probably still play on 1440p myself. I could probably even get away with 4K on Rise of the Tomb Raider fully maxed out as well. So the last game title we're going to benchmark, and it's certainly not least, is The Witcher 3. Now, The Witcher 3 at 1080p did perform a little bit better than 1440p again, but not by much. So using the Ultra Graphic preset with SMAA on and Motion Blur Off, we got a maximum FPS of 123.7, an average FPS of 111.6, a minimum FPS of 98.8, a 1% low of 92.4, and a 0.1% low of 65.5. So what's really interesting about The Witcher 3 at 1080p is it performed about 30% better than it did on the RTX 2070 Super than the 1070 Ti Mini. And all the other games that I've run at 1080p have been really close in comparison. Regardless, let's move on to cranking The Witcher 3 to 1440p. Again, this was on the Ultra preset using SMAA and Motion Blur was off. So on The Witcher 3 at 1440p, we got a maximum FPS of 96.6, an average FPS of 84.9, a minimum FPS of 72.8, a 1% low of 72.3, and a 0.1% low of 68.9. And with the benchmarks of The Witcher 3 out of the way, that is going to conclude the final benchmarks for OptiFlex. So, I think with that said, OptiFlex is finally finished. And the reason why I'm saying that now, and I haven't said that, so confidently before, we've theoretically hit the wall with OptiFlex and the Dell OptiPlex 3040. The 6700 that is inside this computer, the i7 6700, is now the bottleneck for this computer. And the RTX 2070 Super is pretty much the strongest graphics card that I can get away with by not having such a huge bottleneck. I think it only gets bottlenecked about 4% by the 6700. And if I added an RTX 2080 or a 2080 Super, it would definitely just be wasted potential money and it just wouldn't make any sense. So we have pushed the Dell OptiPlex 3040 to its limits, I think, at this point. And I don't think there's anything I can improve upon. I think I've gone all out on this computer. Like, this thing's been through such a journey from being thrown in the garbage, neglected, being left out in the rain, to me pulling it out and replacing the motherboard inside the computer and then just putting an RX 470 in it, to this, to whatever this is, to this beautiful monstrosity, as I call it, this evil mad science. But this has been my favorite project I think I've ever made on this channel. Like, I really enjoyed taking your guys' like constructive criticism, interacting with you all. You guys had so many good ideas into what I could do with OptiFlex. Like, when a bunch of heads come together and look at a project and be like, well, we can improve it on this way. You guys had a lot of improvements that I never even thought of myself. So I could definitely give credit to you guys for how OptiFlex turned out. I really, really wanted you guys to have a hands-on experience with LTX, this year, but it got canceled. And I really wanted you guys to try out OptiFlex in person, but it just didn't happen. Hopefully LTX comes back in 2021 and I'll bring OptiFlex with me and you guys can see it in person and you know, maybe ask me some questions about the modding project. Maybe you guys might want to take on your own modding project. But yeah, it was a lot of fun and I enjoyed doing this series and I know you guys enjoyed it. Judging by my analytics on YouTube, you guys really enjoyed the series. But with that said, guys, I'm going to finally end off this series. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this series. I had a lot of fun. I know you guys did too. So my name's Ken, also known as Wiltshire. Hit that like button or subscribe button if you want to see more things like OptiFlex in the near future. Before I leave you guys, I want to tease you guys with one thing. I am working on a full custom water loop for OptiFlex with a pump reservoir combo, soft tubing, CPU block, and water block and GPU block. And I don't know if it'll ever work. So if it works, you guys will see a new video on OptiFlex in regards to that. But I don't know if it'll work, but I'm gonna leave you guys with that. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Ken, also known as Wiltshire, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care, everyone.